Hi, folks. Today's episode brought to you by one of my favorite sponsors, sunsetlakesebede.com. Use coupon code LEFTISBEST and you get 20% off. You get 20% off the tinctures that come in like 3 different concentrations with 3 different flavors. They also have Sebede tinctures with melatonin, which helps me go to sleep. In fact, it helped me last night go to sleep. Also, they've got a solve with arnica that is great for your muscles. I got to be honest with you, I'm not going to get too revealing here, but I got a little bit of eczema right here, and I put it on. It relieves, and I think it actually makes it go away. That's an off-label use, but it helps. They also have Sebede coffee, which is a great weekend brew. They have Sebede fudge. They have gummies, sour gummies. They have gummies with melatonin. They have smokables that you can smoke in conjunction with other things for an entourage effect, or just on their own after a nice meal. These the Sebede from sunsetlakesebede.com is pesticide free. They use integrated pest management. They practice regenerative farming practices that they worked with the University of Vermont to set up. They have great business practices. They're mostly employee owned, and they are movement partners. They have donated tens of thousands of dollars to things like strike relief funds, refugee resettlement, criminal justice reform, to give directly to food pantries. I mean, all sorts of great stuff. They're a great company. sunsetlakesebede.com. Check it out. Left is best. Gets you 20% off. And now for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, July 7th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, to look back on the week that was, and maybe even a little bit earlier than that. The executive editor of the American Prospect, David Dayen, will be here. Also on the program, decent jobs report, but signs that the Fed's assault on workers may indeed be working. U.S. to send cluster bombs, which incidentally are banned in 100 countries, to Ukraine. And also, maybe to waive their failure rate. Meanwhile, global heat records broken. The last 3 days are the hottest in modern history. Meanwhile, Lula drops Brazil's Amazon deforestation rate by 34%. That may help a little bit. UPS workers, SAG-AFTRA union members gird for possible strikes. SAG-AFTRA 5 days away. UPS 24 days away. Marjorie Taylor Greene booted from the House Freedom Caucus. Arizona Governor Hobbs makes birth control over the counter. And Virginia Governor Youngkin pulls LGBTQ resources off the state's website, bowing to the Daily Wire. Trump aide, soon-to-be fall guy, Walt Nauta, pleads not guilty in that stolen documents case. All this and more
Good man.
on today's Majority Report. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is Friday. I am back from my vacation, and thank you, Emma, for holding down the fort yesterday. Yeah, you were also back from a little mini vacation, right? All you guys.
Yeah, no, well, you get props. You get props for giving us off. Yeah, I mean, 3 days around July 4th. I mean, I gotta say, no one I know had 3 days off, so very well done, Sam.
Ben Shapiro would be proud.
Yeah,
and your 3 days, I can assure you, were far more of a vacation. I was with my kids we were driving. We went down to North Carolina, saw some relatives, then went up to West Virginia, did a little bit of outdoorsy stuff, and then went to Virginia, went to Monticello, and then went up to DC and watched some fireworks.
Whoa, how are so just gotta
Did
ask.
it depress Saul with the wokeness? Sorry to cut in there, Emma,
Yeah.
but the wokeness at Monticello, of course, the sort of panopticon-like slave plantation of Thomas Jefferson, did that depress Saul into a way he hates himself in America now?
It was really embarrassing, but he got up in the middle and is just like, I'm not going to apologize for being white. And
Wow.
Yep.
Well, it did its
Where'd you
job
learn
then.
that?
Good, American education.
There's multiple different tours, and you can go on like a longer tour that sort of combines the house and sort of the some of the story of the enslaved people who worked on at Monticello, but it was really we did them separately because I wasn't sure how it was hot and how much the kids would last, but it was the enslaved people part of the tour was really sort of moving, and it is you're at a location that, and I wasn't going to talk about this, but but I didn't want to make it like Disney. You're at a location. You're there because you're looking at this building, right? And you're looking at the grounds and you're looking at how it functioned and this and that. And the best part about like the sort of the tour that was dedicated to the enslaved people who worked there and lived there is that you realize like all of it was a function of enslaved people. Like all of the craftsmanship in the house was a function of the enslaved people. The system, the way that he raised money, and I thought they did a great job of like explaining too, and everybody seemed to be, at least, I mean, I guess it was a little bit self-selecting because we were on one of the tours was about enslaved people, but they made it clear like chattel slavery was a fairly American innovation, fairly. The number of people forced to migrate to become slaves, also unique in terms of 13 million people, about 11.5 million of whom made it to the country.
Right.
And you also like the Jefferson had, I guess it was, I'm trying to remember now, I think it was 600 slaves over the course of his life. And
that's a lot.
Not even 10% of those did he free because they were all sold as commodities to pay off his debts.
Yep.
And some of the stories are fascinating. Of course, he went to France with a couple of his enslaved people, I guess, including Sally Hastings, Hemmings, sorry, and both Sally Hemmings and I think it was John Hemming. It may have been, or maybe it was John Hastings. I can't remember the other man he was with, but they were there during the French Revolution, and they basically said, like, guess what, man? We're in France. We're free now if we want to. And they negotiated, Hemmings negotiated her children to become free at age 21 that she, had with Jefferson.
Right.
And John, and I can't remember if he was Hemmings or Hastings, who was like was going to be Jefferson's chef, French chef.
Yeah.
Negotiated for his, a freedom like 4 or 5 years out. So, but he needed to, but
that's really interesting in the context of when people say like, oh, the Enlightenment and those sorts of revolutions, they just didn't know that they could have gone farther. It's like, no, people were telling them like, oh, we can extend these sorts of things to like black people, for instance.
Yeah. And let's be clear here too. I mean, you really see the deal that Jefferson made was, I need you to train somebody else to take your position in terms of being a French chef. And you really get the sense of like, oh, wait a second. This is an employee-employer relationship, except like, and by that, I mean, they're taking labor, except in this instance, the employee has zero rights, and they're as a human being, period, end of story, essentially. And also, they're not getting paid for their labor. But relationship,
she was able to negotiate it because of essentially like what was like a long-standing, almost personal relationship.
No, she was able to negotiate it because she happened to have been sent to take care of his kids in France. Okay, and she's in France. She could have stayed. Gotcha. The idea of like how commodified their labor was and how much of a commodity it was. I mean, we talk about this, but the point being that like you really see that connection between capitalism and slavery and the essence of it. I mean, it really is it's a two-part thing, right? We want free labor, and also we have deemed you as a class of people to not be fully human, and therefore that's how we can justify getting your free labor.
Well, that sounds like it did its job then. Monticello, I remember going there as a kid, and I don't think that the education was as robust as you describe. It was much more about Jefferson and the architecture there. I don't know if you have that recollection too.
I saw it in 6th grade, and it probably wasn't as good as it is now, but it was some stuff that stuck with me about like the slavery and stuff.
Yeah,
they've updated it without a doubt. But
well, I was just going to make a joke about if you were in the White House with all that cocaine I know that you like to do, but that was a lot more.
I don't leave it around.
Put it that way. I should have known. Yeah. That was more substantive than what I was trying to say. So good job, Matt.
Let's just well, you know what? Let's do we have David yet? Is he?
Yep. Yes, he's in the waiting room.
Okay. All right. Well, let me do a couple of words from our sponsors. I didn't mean to. We were going to go over some of the economic numbers.
We'll get to history. That's like someone giving you a libertarian at 2:45.
Yeah, I know. There's a little bit of catnip associated with that, without a doubt. But I found, we did the first floor of the house, and it was really interesting. I mean, it really is fascinating, and also just sort of like the way that there was a pond there, a koi pond, and of course, like the enslaved children would catch fish, bring it up from down, way down the hill, essentially, and leave them in the koi pond for when they needed fresh fish. That I found fascinating.
It's crazy.
Anyways, but let's go from history to almost like way into the future. And by that, I mean, of course, as you know, it is 3 of the hottest days, I think, that maybe the Earth has seen, certainly in the modern era. And that means that everybody's feeling a little sweaty and gross. Well, what could be more refreshing than a cool stream of water under your underside? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, your Hello Tushy bidet will be the one sort of like cool spot in your day and on your person. Honestly, if you have ever been had an experience with a bidet, you know what I'm talking about. It is fantastic. Once you go bidet, you do not go back. It makes total sense. All right, think about this. When you have dirt on your hands, do you take a dry paper towel and wipe it off? No, of course not. Use water. And that's what it's about with a bidet. If you've never had a bidet, I know you think it's weird, but I'm telling you, it makes so much sense.
It's
first time you try
cultured. It's cultured, right? You want to be European.
It just feels great. It really does. Yeah. And a Hello Tushy bidet cleans your bum 2 times better than wiping. Also prevents poo particles from spreading to your hands and everything you touch. The Hello Tushy bidet washes your bum with fresh water. It has a way better clean than toilet paper. All you do, you spray and you pat dry. And here's the best part about Hello Tushy. If you know how to change a toilet seat, which you have to do periodically, then you know how to put on this bidet. It is a bidet attachment. It is not one of those multi-$1,000 devices. It is super easy. You can put it on your toilet within 8 minutes. It cuts down your toilet paper use by 80%. Honestly, it is a revelation. Hello Tushy bidet attachment comes with a 60-day risk-free guarantee and a 12-month warranty. Has over 100,000 5-star reviews. You can see why millions of people already love Hello Tushy. Be part of taking care of business the cleaner way. Go to hellotushy.com/majority. Use the promo code majority to get 10% off plus free shipping on your first bidet order. That's hellotushy.com/majority for 10% off. Also, one of our sponsors, Henson Shaving. Did you get your father?
I did. Got a report back. I asked after the first time he does it because he shaves every day, and he said, I could find it actually in my phone, but he just essentially said, no cuts, very clean shave. It was a Father's Day gift for him, and he really appreciated it.
It's great.
Yeah,
it was great. Henson Shaving is great. I mean, I don't shave that much, but I'll tell you, right here and here and up here and up here, I don't even use shaving cream. The blades are so nice.
Shave?
Yeah, because it's honestly, Henson Shaving, family-owned business. They made aerospace parts, or they do, I guess, for the International Space Station, the Mars rover. Now they're taking their precision engineering and they're bringing it to your shaving experience. And it turns out the discomfort that men and women experience when shaving with disposable razors is not due to the blade. It is due to the fact that the blade extends too far. That causes the blade to wobble freely. Razors are like dry diving boards, apparently. The longer the board, the more wobble, the more nicks, the more cuts, the more scrapes. Bad shave, like I say, is not a blade problem. It's an extension problem. They have aerospace grade computer I don't know. I can never remember what that is. Machines, but I know what they are. Like they're computer guided.
Yeah.
CNC.
And Henson makes metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches, less than the thickness of a human hair. That means a secure and stable blade with vibration-free shave. And the razor has channels to evacuate the hair, so you don't have to bang your razor on the sink. And the thing about Henson Shaving is that they want to be the best razor, not necessarily the best razor business. That means you buy it once and you are done.
And it's good for the environment. That was part of why my dad's really into reducing his carbon footprint, and that's why it's like the perfect gift for that kind of thing, because you don't get plastic razors all the time. No
plastic, no subscriptions, no proprietary blades, and no planned obsolescence. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades that give you that old school straight razor shave with the benefits of new school tech. Once you own a Henson razor, it's about $3 to $5 a year to replace the blades, but you're not going to have to replace the blades at least for the first year, because they're giving you folks a 2-year supply of blades for free. Just go to hensonshaving.com/majority. That's HENSON shaving.com/majority. Add a razor and make sure you add a 100 pack of blades to your cart. Then enter the code majority. You'll get the blades for free. The link is in the description, both YouTube and podcast. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to David Dayen. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure, as always, to welcome back to the program the executive editor of the American Prospect. And let me also just say, folks, if you have not been reading the American Prospect, you have no idea what you're missing. This is a publication that is read in the White House and to all of our benefit, frankly. It has been amazing to see. It's been 2 years now.
It's been 4 years.
What?
4 years.
Well, it's been amazing to see what you've been doing with it. It feels like 2 years. That's how much.
Breezing by.
Prospect.org, head over there. You guys do no paywalls, right? You just rely on people appreciating the work you're doing and
no
sign up for a member
paywalls.
like I did.
No paywalls. We just had a fundraising drive that was very successful here at the end of June. And so we thank everybody for their support. And then anybody else who's listening wants to do the same, prospect.org/membership. $5 a month gets you all kind of goodies.
All right. Now, David, I know that you said just before we went on.
No,
air
here's what I want to know.
Okay.
Here's what I want to know. You were the co-host. I don't know if you've talked about this on the show or not. You were the co-host of the Ring of Fire Radio with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Correct. Yeah.
Have
I
we
didn't know you were
talked
going to bring
about
this up. I should say. Yeah.
Have you talked about this on the show?
I have talked about this on the show. I mean, to some extent.
Did you see signs there of where he is today? I mean, you worked with him pretty close. You were co-host.
Yeah. And I knew him. I knew him at Air America, and he was very supportive of me at Air America. And there were times that we would talk about this. He has been a vaccine skeptic or anti-vaxxer, frankly, for at least 20 years and maybe 18. I don't know. Prior to, I've only known him for, 19 years. And we had conversations about this over time. He would it was down low, and it was also sort of like his second. He was still very much involved in the Riverkeeper and suing people who were polluting in the Hudson. He did great work in that instance. I honestly don't. I have complete speculative theories that I don't have any other basis in just pure speculation, what's going on in his head. I don't. But I think, as to why he has this relentless skepticism, regardless of because at one point when I was sort of in that era of his skepticism, it was about thimerosal. And in 2003 or 4, when Air America started in 2004, I remember very early on, we had someone on who was talking about thimerosal in vaccines and was saying look, there is, and I don't know if this was before or after the Lancet piece.
The Salon article thing, right?
Yeah. No. Yeah. This is before the Salon article.
Yeah, Wakefield and the Lancet.
But I think it was before the Lancet thing had been retracted. But there was a theory that thimerosal, which is a preservative, it is a mercury element, but it's a specific type of mercury. Not necessarily the most, the one that's associated with the neurotoxin. There was a question as to whether this was problematic, but thimerosal had been taken out of the vast majority, if not all, of the early child vaccines in 2000, 2001. And so the idea was we need to wait another year or two at that point to see if there was a drop in autism rates, to see if there was a connection between the thimerosal and autism. And then 2005 happens, 2006, and there is no drop. And I remember, having this conversation with Bob, and I think we did it on air, Ring of Fire, at one point. I can't remember when this was, maybe in 2012, somewhere around there. I don't know. And he believed at that time that thimerosal was still in the vaccines, despite the fact that they said it was taken out. And I found that
there's always a way out, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And And, that wouldn't have been hard for somebody to sort of test. Like a doctor could say, like, I'm sending this to a lab and just say, is there thimerosal in it? And they could have come back and said, there is, even though it supposedly says on the label there isn't. And so I was very skeptical of that. And then, I mean, I think
how many years was that relationship?
Well, I think we were doing. He had been doing the show for an extended period of time, but I think I did it with him from like 2010 to 2014 or 2015. But to be clear, it was not typical. We didn't do it together.
It wasn't the daily vaccine report.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, I remember him saying at one point, this could. I know this could ruin my career. His intense skepticism. So I think it is like,
sincere.
I think it's sincere, but that doesn't mean that it's not, in addition to being wrong, in my estimation, but there isn't a contrivance associated with what's going on.
Right. But you didn't work together a lot, but at some point you did.
He would do an interview and I would do an interview separately, and occasionally, maybe we would have like a conversation about the news, and we were never in the same place.
But let me ask you this: do you think, because he's running like the McKinley, it was called a front porch campaign. He's running a front podcast campaign, right? He's really only doing podcasts, right? Do you think that experience over many years kind of gave him a facility with that style?
No one's written about that, because no one concludes, even like Rebecca Tracey did this, and there was no mention of he did that show for 10 years. And on a weekly basis. And I think there was a comfortability with that. He's also like very well spoken. He is he's an intelligent guy. But there's two things that I will say. I think his politics have moved to the right. Put aside the vaccination stuff. I think his politics and even the anti-COVID stuff, from what I've heard him say lately, his fealty to property rights, his saying, no single payer health insurance,
his ads about Bitcoin and the necessity for Bitcoin.
Yes, I think that his politics have moved towards a libertarian in a way that was different from what I remember. And then I'll also say that I think that, like, one thing that I have not heard people speculate, but I would not be, I think that there is a non-zero chance, and certainly higher than that Trump seriously considers him as his running mate.
Well, why else is Steve Bannon in the orbit? Why else would Roger Stone be involved? I think that's the best theory so far.
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
But putting that aside, I mean, the reason I bring it up is I think, much as Trump prepared himself for politics with a life in television, or at least, a decade or so, it seems like Kennedy prepared himself for this moment with an extended period of time in radio. And you can see the way in which he can distill things down, the way, just like, that's a skill, right? That's a particular talent that is well suited to the way he's running this campaign.
Good point.
Yeah. I definitely think that's part of it. I do think, though, that part of it was also, frankly, up until age 13, 14, traveling around with his father.
Sure.
And being in that family, and full of orators. And I think also, the type of advocacy he was doing with the Riverkeeper, and the lawyering he was doing, I think all that adds to it. But it is interesting to me that nobody has. You're the only person who has brought up, has expressed that, and that occurred to me during. I was surprised in Rebecca Traister's piece that she never even mentioned he was on Air America. Never mentioned his radio work with the Ring of Fire that extended after Air America by 6-7 years.
I mean, I probably should have done this with you off the air so that I can write about it. But
you can write about it now.
But just to play armchair psychologist just briefly, as someone who doesn't know him, like you mentioned his father, having multiple members of your family killed, losing them in that way. This is charitable, but it is, I think, appropriately empathetic to his position. It can, I would imagine, lead you down very conspiratorial paths or prime you to certain thinking that is quite unique to his circumstance. I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, but he had brothers and sisters as well. I mean, and so who are in the same boat. I mean, but yes, I think.
Not to absolve him, it's just I think maybe some helpful context to understand.
Well, I
think being a trial lawyer also makes it very easy to believe that.
That too.
But
dealing with corporate malfeasance and all
Dave for Jamaica on the IM captures really my issues. Well, aside from the vax and the COVID stuff, and the he says RFK logic, big pharma is evil, but let's not break them up. I mean, that's the thing, is that like he can advocate, he may have a sense of like a revolving door problem at the FDA and at the EPA and this and that. But if he comes in and fixes that, what happens? I'm just, and just even using his logic, he comes in and fixes that. What happens 4 or 8 years later when he leaves? It's just the next guy comes in and reverses it. I mean,
that's really true of anybody, right? But I mean, I think
But I'm saying you could impose structural changes in legislation, and which is a good segue into your the first piece of yours that I wanted to talk about. I mean, I'm happy we've talked about it, and I'm happy to but there really is not a lot more that I have in terms of insight of that. I mean, it's upsetting because I was when I was starting out doing comedy in Boston, I was working at a burger place in Harvard Square, and there were 2 people that I gave coffee to that I remember from that time. One was Al Pacino, jerk, and one was Bobby Kennedy. And I was so excited to have, given him a coffee. I think he tipped me pretty well too. I mean, that was a huge, and it really is upsetting a little bit. And and he's a nice guy.
And I imagine after that, then getting to work with him was like a real
huge.
Thrill.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was ecstatic, and which makes it all that much more sort of depressing, frankly. But all right. I'm happy to talk about that more later at a different time, but I want to talk about this because this is the type of like sort of long-term structural stuff that, and it's not necessarily structural, but structural in the sense that there is a lane of thought that dictates, particularly Democrats, it seems to me, which limits their imagination. And that is a big problem, I think, that we've had for really 40 years of Democrats having this problem. And you write about it today, I guess it was, Death of an Economic Theory. That theory is about crowding out. Will you explain to us what that theory has been and how it's been shown to be false?
Well, I mean, the theory in its simplest terms is that if you engage in public investment, if you spend government money on a particular purpose, that private investment in that particular purpose will be crowded out. And this is kind of a fundamental, it's so fundamental kind of a theory that it's built into economic modeling. When the Congressional Budget Office or outside analysts look at some sort of public investment, whether it's the infrastructure bill or the kind of bill like the CHIPS Act, which gives money to semiconductor manufacturing, it discounts the effect of that spending because it says it will crowd out private investment. I mean, that is sort of in the law, that any public spending is half as effective as private spending. This is as you're, putting bills out and as they're getting scored, that is the assumption that is made at the heart of those bills. And it makes it very difficult to actually engage in this kind of public investment because there's this sort of very obscure, hidden bias against it because it doesn't get as much bang for its buck. And what we're seeing right now, and this is particularly showing up in the manufacturing construction numbers, which have doubled over the past year since the CHIPS Act and also the Inflation Reduction Act came into being. And in the specific areas that CHIPS and IRA are targeting, which is electronics, computers, that kind of manufacturing, it's quadrupled. And what we're seeing is private spending, even in a time when interest rates have gone from 0% to 5%, and that should depress private investment, we're seeing that private investment soar at the same levels. Yesterday, the White House said that $500 billion in private investment has been announced and been pledged since the passage of the IRA and CHIPS. And so this really kind of calls into question this entire, it's not just a talking point. I don't want to just call it a talking point. It's kind of a fundamental theory that is baked into policymaking. And what is happening around the IRA and CHIPS should really challenge it.
I think people, can remember at times where there's a big bill on the floor, whether it's like, the Affordable Care Act or whatever it is, or a tax, some tax bill where everybody's waiting for the CBO score. And so that's what you're talking about. When the CBO scores an investment bill, they basically say that if private industry was investing $100 million into this, the return would be, $1 billion. But if government invests $100 million in this, the return will be $500 million. And because it sidelines the investment that would come. And this is basically, we have a real world example that shows the opposite is happening. That is not the case, that it's attracting all of this business, that it's hard to imagine what otherwise would happen. I mean, you write in your piece that Europe is freaking out a little bit because of the hydrogen production facilities that have moved to the U.S. That there are
they're losing investment.
18 new semiconductor facilities started in the past whatever it was, I guess 24 months or so, less. And what's interesting about this, it seems to me, is like this is something that we should be hearing more about, right? Because you go through like what this could lead to, like if the understanding of this crowding out effect, has been operative for years and decades, and an excuse to halt government investment in things. What kind of things, for a moment, assume that constraint was off it. What kind of things would we see in the future that could come from this?
Well, just think about it. I mean, it means that public investment is as important, if not more, as sort of a flycatcher kind of effect than private investment, relying on that alone. And so, suddenly bills that caused or asked to invest more in certain sectors of the economy, whether it's, pick a sector, healthcare, education, whatever, they will be looked upon more favorably if in fact this causes that change at CBO, right? I mean, CBO not really take this into account. And I should say that not everybody is on board with this. I talked to Jason Furman.
All right. Well, I want to get to Furman in a second. I want to get to, but I want to talk about the sort of like the potential positive implications of this, because we heard for a long time. I mean, back in the aughts, I guess it was, government does not create jobs. Maybe it was during the Obama years, right? The government does not create jobs. They're fake jobs or whatever it is.
Right.
Government does not create economic activity. And the idea that government can spur this type of economic growth in a particular sector, which our society is deemed helpful to us in some fashion,
essential,
right?
Yeah.
Is huge. And I still remember, like, when these moments happen, it feels like Democrats do not capitalize on it enough. Like Sam Brownback's Kansas was a perfect example, it seemed to me, of the failure of trickle-down economics. And yet, and the Republicans knew that failure could be problematic. I mean, they literally made Sam Brownback ambassador to faith to get him away from, I guess, planet Earth, as he's like in the, wherever he is. But
in the celestial
sphere. Like, is there a broad understanding of the implications of this, at least within like advocacy groups and left policymakers?
I mean, I think so. What we're seeing over the past week or two is this sort of rebranding exercise, this Bidenomics attempt that both the president and members of the cabinet are going out into communities. He announced yesterday he's going to be at a groundbreaking at a factory in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. We were actually at that factory 2 weeks ago, and we're going to have a report on it pretty soon. But I think there is a desire to sort of recast this. The difficulty, of course, that Biden has is that most of the things that have been passed, most of these industrial policy measures, have long time horizons. That's why I say where we're picking up on this right now is in manufacturing construction. I mean, they're literally building the plants right now. That things aren't coming out of the plants necessarily, so you wouldn't see it in manufacturing statistics overall, which are more based on supply and demand at this point. But in the construction, in the early stages, we are starting to see it. Now that affects the building trades. It doesn't affect necessarily, service workers or manufacturing workers or whatnot. So I think that's the challenge of, is this going to be as big a factor and as much of a factor in people's lives? That's the political challenge. I think the challenge for groups inside Washington, the challenge for policymakers, is to recognize that this is happening and that it really does call into question some fundamental beliefs about the economy and fundamental beliefs about public involvement in the economy that have predominated for about 40 years or more. I mean, it's sort of a core neoliberal value that's being challenged here.
Okay. And so there's really two aspects of this, right? There's that political argument that you're just talking about, because that really is a political argument. And there's also sort of like the material one in terms of like, let's start with the material one. What are the benefits? What does the returns on this look like? I mean, that's great for, that we have incentivized by maybe providing grants or tax, benefits to these companies. What do we get out of it as a society? Walk us through the material benefits there. If it were up to me, I would say, like, in addition to that, we're also going to take a piece of the pie. I want some, we invest.
Yeah, I mean, the jury's out on how this is going to all play out. I mean, we have been, we have reported from Arizona, where the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation is building a plant in Phoenix, and they're mostly using non-union labor for that construction. It's set them behind. It's caused a lot of accidents, potential deaths. We've done some really good reporting around that by one of our writers, Lee Harris. So the question of whether these new industrial policy, manufacturing jobs are going to be good jobs is still open. Like, that still remains to be seen. So the argument that I'm making here is more about the benefit and whether or not we should mark down public spending writ large. You still have to do a lot of policy to make sure that public spending is channeled into good paying union potentially jobs that engage the rest of the community and have broadly shared prosperity and all that. That's an ongoing project. We're reporting on it, and we're going to see what the benefits of that will be. But here at the outset, what we can say is that you shouldn't immediately cut it in half in terms of its impact just because it comes out of the government's pocket rather than out of a private businessman's pocket.
And as a political matter, it's not just there's the sort of like, I guess, the economic matter of like government spending. Government can spend poorly or wisely or whatnot, depending on where you're targeting, and in terms of and what determines that, at least in my mind, is what broadly society gets and how widely that spending, the benefits of that spending, are disseminated. But the fact that government dollars are just as effective, and maybe more so than, in fact, I would argue more so, because they're directed, like they're more effective in providing benefit for society, at least because that's the point of those dollars. Right. There's that sort of argument, but then there's also the broader argument of there is it seems to me, a huge cohort of people who don't want government to be effective. They don't want the words government is effective to be something that people accept, because then it opens up the doors to government doing a whole host of things.
Let me say two things about that. We have seen, and I was just quoted by Fair on this, we have seen over the past year and a half, 67 Wall Street Journal editorials about Lena Khan. One every 11 days. The American Economic Liberties
She's
Project
the head of the Federal
Trade Commission. That she and the American Economic Liberties Project is tracking this. They're up to 67 op-eds about her. And why is that? Because she's an effective regulator. Because she's an effective, aggressive member of the administration who is challenging pieties that we've seen over the last 40 years. And so what you say there is absolutely right. Like, they don't want an effective leader, and they need to snuff that out as fast as humanly possible before anybody else gets the idea that there are ways to govern other than in deference to large corporations. So yes, you're absolutely right about that. The second thing I want to say real quick is, yes, there can obviously be bad public spending. I mean, on our site today, we have a story from one of our interns, Elizabeth Meisenthal, about the continued proliferation of public funding for stadiums, which are mostly vacant most of the year, which are essentially corporate welfare given to billionaire owners of sporting franchises that have little or no proven public benefit. They're always claimed that there's a huge public benefit to it, but it never seems to work out that way because these places are empty most of the time.
And it acts as a ransom to certain communities that says, well, if you don't give me the big, this is happening in Oakland right now, they want the bigger tax giveaway in Nevada, so it doesn't matter what the community thinks.
Absolutely.
And we saw it in New York with the bills. It's about to happen in Jacksonville too. Sorry, this is my little corner of expertise.
All of which happens to be in this story. There was an actual rejection at the ballot in Tempe, Arizona. Last month, they denied an NHL stadium, a new NHL stadium being built in Tempe. But you know, the work continues there. But the point is that yes, there can be bad spending, and obviously we need to guard against that, and we need to figure out ways to channel this into productive uses. But when you do, you shouldn't be automatically discounted in this fashion. And what we're seeing is a real world example of what spending towards a necessary public purpose can engender.
And I just want to belabor that first point, though, for a moment, because that's why I think this story is so important. That you've written it, but that it be something that gets absorbed into the bloodstream, because regardless of where your politics are on a left spectrum, until the idea that government, Ronald Reagan's, the scariest words are, "I'm from the government, I'm here to help you," or Bill Clinton for that matter, the era of big government is over, like these type of like sort of bromides, I guess. Until there is an understanding and an acceptance that government is effective or can be effective if deployed, that there is no sort of like generic or secular restriction on the efficacy of government. Till that sort of like political fight is won, you will not get single payer healthcare. You will not get nationalization of our power grid. You will not get, maybe the making of generic drugs or any type of drugs for that matter. I could go on and on. But all the policies that go from the center to the left and as far left as you want to go until you become an anarchist, essentially, the belief in the efficacy of government and the sort of like mystified economics that as if there is like some type of like, a natural law that for whatever reason says that government efficacy is impossible. Like it is relative to the private sector. Until that is sort of defeated or weakened, that ideology, you're not going to get these things in the way that we want them to. It's always going to be begrudging in some fashion.
And that's why this set of data is so important, and important to highlight, and important to get into the bloodstream of Washington to really challenge that prevailing view. And so, we'll see if the administration is ready to do it. But I mean, I pulled a lot of that information and material from administration releases. So they're clearly aware of it, and they clearly want to fight this narrative. We'll see if they're successful.
You say that the Biden administration has bought into the concept of crowding in. In other words, that if you dump, and it's, I guess the real question is like, can it be as effective as private money? We saw what the Gates Foundation did to education in this country. They drop $1 billion into our education system, and then probably another couple of $1 billion ancillarily around it that they can actually sell stuff, whatever computer stuff they wanted to sell to education. And we saw the impact that had on public education across the country. So that's the same sort of idea. If you drop some money in, but the government can do it just as effectively. But talk about Jason Furman, because it's almost like Larry Summers runs to wherever Caribbean island he's doing his CNBC hits from, as inflation sort of turns out to be exactly not what he described it or characterized it. It is fascinating to watch some of these sort of like economists who have been either believe or perpetrating this notion, these sort of ironclad precepts, having to sort of like deal with the reality that they're not so iron or clad.
Yeah, and Furman, when I reached out to him, said, actually, this is a perfect example of crowding out. And what he said is if you have to look at the big picture, you have to look at the macro analysis of overall private fixed investment, which he says is, down from the trend pre-pandemic by 2%. Now, what we've seen is that interest rates have gone from nothing to 5% in that period. And yet, this is a very modest drop from the trend. Now, what he would say is, oh, yes, but the reason interest rates went up is because we did too much spending, right? And so, the public investment then led to interest rate increases, which led to depressed private spending. Now, whether or not you believe that or agree with that depends on whether you see the fact of inflation coming from directly from public investment and from public spending, or whether you see as inflation as resulting from supply chain issues, corporate markups, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So, there's a lot to unpack there, but that's generally his argument.
Well, but let's put a couple holes in this, right? I mean, because to look at the macro picture where the money has been invested in a certain area, that belies the whole theory of crowd out, unless you're talking about like the planet, like it's crowded it out from the planet, because just the idea of government spending somehow prevents private investment in other parts of the economy where the government didn't spend. It's absurd. It's utterly absurd. That's like, I don't know. That's like trying to make an argument about
the sort
air.
of the obvious way to talk about it is that the industries that are incentivized are going to be the ones that pop. And also the fact that all this money is pouring in despite the increase in rates, I think is an important factor. I mean, if what would be interesting to see is if there was none of this type of targeted public investment, if there was just sort of generalized spending, at the same level maybe, but out to people, like checks to people or something, and it wasn't specifically for industrial development, I don't think you would see a tapering effect of just 2% off trend from a huge increase in interest rates. I think that would be more of a collapse rather than a slight deviation from trend. And so I think that is if anything, more evidence of crowding in, that the money is really pouring into industrial construction despite these high rates.
And let's be clear too. As far as I know, our inflation rate relative to the G7, I think, is the lowest of the G7. And I would also bet that
the GDP is the highest.
And I would bet that the increased funding that we had during COVID in terms of like the child tax rate, I mean, on and on and on, the expansion of COBRA, the trillions of dollars that the U.S. government spent relative to the baseline is much greater than what we saw amongst the rest of the G7, because they were already there in certain areas anyways.
Right.
And
I
so
mean, his
theory of inflation, it seems to me, is bunk.
His argument about crowd out is very much tied to his theory about inflation. And so there is no crowd out unless you see the fact of public spending as being, deleterious to America's economic growth, even though, as you correctly point out, it's the same as every other country had the same trajectory, and our trajectory is better on growth and better on inflation than any of the other ones.
And so let's be clear. His argument is government spending is bad, and therefore also government spending is bad.
Well, yes,
that's his argument, right? I mean, he's starting with the premise that government spending is bad and has bad effects, and that's why government spending has bad effects in other places.
Right, and broadening the lens until he can find the data available to confirm that analysis.
It's an important piece to have put this stuff together, and I hope that this is like a lesson that's being absorbed. I mean, you mentioned the Stephanie Kelton's. She had an exchange. I guess it was back in.
It was back when she was on the staff of the Senate Budget Committee, and she asked CBO
working for Sanders. We should say
working for Sanders, and she asked CBO, explain to me this whole crowd out thing, and they explained to her what we've just been over, and she said, well, what about crowd in? And she said that the people at CBO looked at her like she had three horns. And so I think Stephanie was very happy when I contacted her and said, well, what do you think now?
Right.
She was relishing the opportunity. And she said, I was thinking back to that conversation. I was thinking back to when you wrote that up. It's an interesting time when some of these orthodoxies are coming into question.
All right. Well, I want to talk about one other piece that you wrote. I have not been here for the past week or so, and on Monday we're going to talk to
advising RFK. Is that what you were doing?
That is exactly. Yeah, that's my side gig.
The kitchen cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. More Rogan. That's what I said.
More Rogan.
More Rogan.
That's why it's a podcast strategy. That's all you know. So so you're giving him that information.
Exactly. But we're going to have Mark Joseph Stern on, I think, on Monday to talk about the specifics of this case. But you wrote up Plan B now that the court struck that down. Walk me through this. I know that
you're talking about student debt.
I'm talking about student debt. Yeah. And you had written one of the great things that you had done over there at the Prospect was in the days leading up to the administration. I think like in actually in the fall of 2019.
19.
Was it? No, wasn't it? It was fall. It was fall.
Day one agenda was the fall of 2019. Yeah.
Okay. So this was basically you saying like what power the president's going to have, assuming that he doesn't have Congress. And one of the things you talked about was you can relieve student debt under the Higher Education Act of 1965. Right. They chose to use the HEROES Act. We've talked about this in the past. Give me your assessment. First, tell us what they're going to do now, supposedly. And there's a complicated sort of element to this. Right. But then we'll talk about like how relevant it is. Is there really, from the perspective of the Supreme Court, is there a difference between Plan B or Plan A at the end of the day? Right. Because they don't like it.
Right. I mean, Plan B is Plan A, right? Actually, as you said, 4 years ago, we said, yeah, you can use the Higher Education Act to cancel student debt. And now what they've come around to is this idea that you can use the Higher Education Act to cancel student debt. Now, what they have to do with it is engage in what the Department of Education does when they put regulations together. They engage in something called negotiated rulemaking. And that means they bring all these stakeholders together and they have questions about the rulemaking, and they pull it apart and they have public meetings, and eventually then the department writes the rule based on that feedback. It's an extended process. It takes quite a while. I don't want to get into all the reasons why they have to engage in this, even though the statute is fairly clear and says that that there is this compromise and settlement authority to make compromise a debt in any amount, modify any provision of a loan note. This is all in the Higher Education Act of 1965. It says you can waive or release any title, claim, lien, or demand on student debtors. I mean, it's very clear to me that they have this authority, but because over the years there were extra regulations thrown in that used language that was referring to other processes, I really don't want to get into it. It's monstrously complicated. They feel like they have to do this negotiated rulemaking. So why first of all, what's the difference to the Supreme Court? I mean, the answer maybe is nothing. Certainly in his preamble, in the ruling itself, Chief Justice Roberts made this claim that yes, under the Higher Education Act, the Secretary of Education can cancel debt, but only in very limited circumstances and only under very limited terms. So, they've laid out, he was kind of preempting this Plan B, right? So they've definitely laid out this theory that they can go ahead and kill this one the same way that they would kill the other thing. The question, I guess, is one of standing. And, I guess I can get into the whole standing thing. So,
well, no, I mean, let me just sum up where we are, because the standing thing, I think, is actually pretty straightforward, and may be, it's certainly the most egregious aspect of this ruling, in my estimation.
Right.
And egregious not just in the context of this case, but also speaks to how egregious this court is in what they're doing. But just to be clear, there are two theories that you sort of outline as to why the administration is going through this process. And one of them is that they want to kick the can to make it look like they're pursuing this and kick the can to 2025.
Because of the negotiated rulemaking, which might take up to a year, that means they wouldn't put out the rule and then start to try to cancel student debt until the middle of next year. And then based on the calendar of how the Supreme Court works, they wouldn't get an answer on whether they could do it until 2025. So this does keep them, they get caught trying, right? They keep trying to cancel it through the election. So that's the cynical sort of view of this.
And how much on that front are progressives in Congress and this and that? How much are they pushing, and do they think that there's a way for them to push, to expedite that process?
I mean, we don't know how long it's going to take. There are certainly advocates who said you should have just used the rules you have and canceled and went away. I think if they tried to do that, the Supreme Court would be very swift in knocking it down. And maybe, they would, one theory is, well, but if you actually canceled, you actually sent people a letter that said your debt is canceled, and the Supreme Court has to then take away that, and they have to get another letter sent that says because of the Supreme Court, you still owe the money, that would be more difficult for the Supreme Court to do. I don't necessarily agree that that's very difficult for the Supreme Court to do. So that's the one side of it. The second side is that the only way that student debt, this cancellation program got nullified was because of the use of a servicer. Servicer does day-to-day operations on a loan, that they said the servicer was going to lose money because they would lose loans because they would be fully canceled. And therefore, because the servicer loses money, and in this particular case, they said the servicer was an instrumentality of the state of Missouri. And so when the state of Missouri sued, because let's be clear, Missouri's servicer, known as the Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority of Mohala, said, we have nothing to do with this case. We don't want this case. We didn't bring this case. We only heard about it through the news. We're against this case. But they said, oh, but the state of Missouri is, they created you. And so Mohala, you're part of the state of Missouri. And so that's why you have standing. In a negotiated rulemaking session, the servicers are going to be at the table. And it's going to be very clear and direct that they're going to be probably bought off. In other words, they'll say, and by the way, this was kind of already implicit in the initial program, where the servicers got money to cancel the loans. And it was more money than they get to just service the loans. And there was an actual increase, like if you did the actual math, which the Supreme Court did not do, they just accepted the numbers that the state of Missouri gave them. If you did the actual math, it is definitely arguable that the servicers would make more money under the loan cancellation program, at least in the first few years, which is all you need because it's a short-term contract that the servicers get. You can't say, oh, you denied me money 10 years down the road when I may or may not have a contract, right? It's only those short term. That was already the case. But in a negotiated rulemaking, it's going to be very clear that that's the case. And so the next time when Missouri says, hey, Mohala is going to lose money again, and you got to get rid of this, the state, the government will have a much clearer path to say, no, Mohala is actually going to make money out of this. And here's why, because they negotiated the rule with us. And so that's the theory that might cut off an avenue of standing and allow this to hold.
And let's be clear. And I just want to step back. There's a couple of important premises here they're important to say. And this, I know this from my first year civil procedure class. To bring a suit, the whole point of the judicial is that there must be some actual case that exists, so that they're not
Injury in fact,
legislatures. They cannot do hypotheticals, because hypothetical is why you have lawmakers. They look into the future. This could happen, that could happen. We're going to pass a law to do it. There needs to be an actual case to be adjudicated. For you to bring suit, you must show harm that is done to you. And in this instance, the state the state could not show harm, so they basically said, well, we're a surrogate for some other entity that suffers harm, but that other entity said, we didn't suffer harm. We're not part of this. They didn't even know they were part of the case. Incidentally, we should also say this is the same thing with the graphic designer too thing,
right. Which is even more hypothetical, because it was stipulated that it was
completely faked. Yes.
Yeah.
And so the standing issue, and in fact, the administration closed off the avenue for some other people who might have a standing issue early on when they made a little tweak. Once they started getting wind of the way that the Republicans were going to try and attack this. And so in those two theories that you just laid out, one being the cynical one being we're going to make sure that there's no standing issue, so that nobody can actually bring a suit here. Because if nobody is harmed, but people have to understand too.
But of course, that relies on the belief that the court is going to abide by actual rules and
that's the other thing.
Theories that exist in the world. I mean, so I'd have no problem with the cynical view necessarily, because you to believe that the administration is doing the right thing here is to believe that this is a legitimate court.
Yes. Okay. Fair. And we should say the corruption of this court, and I do mean in corruption in terms of like the process of being corrupted, is two-part. One is they made up the standing. I mean, there was no standing.
And so if they made up the standing, why wouldn't they make up a second standing?
Exactly. And we should also say it's a two-parter, because you need the standing to get the case to be heard. But the way that they resolved this case was basically to say, there's legislative authority here under the HEROES Act. Congress reiterated that by saying, we anticipate debt forgiveness, and it is not going to be taxable. So they anticipated it happening. Right. The court just said, when something's this important, we get to decide under our new doctrine that we made up a couple of years ago called the Major Questions Doctrine, which basically says it's like a wild card. We can, whatever the law is or whatever the situation is, all we do is whip out our wild card and we get to decide. End of story. And so they need to pretend that they're standing so the case can exist. And then they come up with this doctrine that says we're allowed to do whatever we want.
And so given that, I mean, I think it's reasonable for someone to say the idea that you're going to outwit this court that has shown no interest in sort of playing by the rules of the game is ludicrous. So, I don't have a problem with people saying, that this is hopeless. But if it is in fact hopeless, then what do you as an administration that wants to deliver this do? I mean, they can sort of take the final shot and sort of end the idea that you could do this kind of student debt forever, right? Because and they could do it without doing a negotiated rulemaking, or they can keep, working through the process and playing by the rules, even though Calvin Ball, they'll change the rules down the road. I mean, so it's an interesting question. I mean, I think one other part of this is the fact that the administration released this thing called income-driven repayment, and that hasn't been challenged, by the way. And many administrations have done this. And it essentially says a portion of your income is going to go towards paying off your student loan, and we're going to cap it at that rate, that percentage. And then after 20 years, if you have still money left over, we're going to forgive it. And the administration's new version of this has really ratcheted down that percentage. First of all, there's an exemption for the first $30,000 of disposable income, right? So if you're making $30,000 a year or less, which is about 1/4 of all college graduates, and a much higher percentage of people who didn't graduate college who have student debt, which is 40% of all student debtors didn't graduate college, those people are going to pay $0 on their student loans if they're signed up for this income-driven repayment program.
And theoretically, if they don't make any more money over the course, and plus with that cushion of 30,000, 20 years, if they're making 50,000 and they only have $30,000 worth of disposable income, 20 years runs out and then they don't owe anything.
That's right. And so there's as much forgiveness in the income-driven repayment program potentially as there is in Biden's initial announcement. And the problem is that you have to enroll everybody in it. Like, there's no automatic process here.
Right.
And so that's going to be, I mean, I wrote a very long piece about the return of student payments, which is going to return in October, and what a mess
a disaster.
It's going to be.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that maybe at a later time. But the point is that they are trying on a number of different fronts here to reduce this burden, which is now, I mean, the problem is no matter how much they reduce it, it's going to be a shock to millions of student borrowers. They're going to be paying more in October. They're either going to be paying $0, which is the same number they paid for the last 3 years, or more. And it's on now this president's watch that those payments resumed and they snap back on. And it's going to be, it's going to be a problem, I think, for politically, in terms of economic policy. Suddenly, $400 a month that these borrowers are going to have to pay potentially if they don't sign up for IDR. That's the average student loan payment. That's going into a budget that didn't have that payment just for the last 3 years. This is going to be a very chaotic over the next several months.
And we should say the income-driven repayment plan, even if the dollar figures at the end of 20 years end up being the same, the amount of anxiety and hassle, it's literally like another job that you have there, and it will freeze people in a way that, if you know how much is forgiven up front, at the very least, then you have the ability to function. We used to always hear uncertainty with the business community. They don't know whether, it's the same, with individuals. If, I don't know 20 years from now, I'm going to save the same amount that I would save, this week. That's a very different sort of attitude towards investing, taking risks with your life, living your life. It really is.
Absolutely.
Well, David, I knew we would end up in that point. That's the way it always works with us, right? We just get to that.
I'm just not a sunny guy like your former co-host, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You're really enjoying it.
Where you could have
really enjoying it.
Are you going to take state or transportation, or maybe commerce?
We'll see. We'll see what he offers me. If he gives me education, I'm just going to forgive the loans. And
there you go. So that's the move. Kennedy 24. And,
there you go.
Education Secretary Seder will.
That's my promise. Right. David Dayen, always a pleasure. Thanks so much, folks. Go read the Prospect. Go sign up and become a member of the American Prospect, and support this kind of journalism. David, always a pleasure.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David.
God. All right. Let's have some fun. Go to the fun half.
Yes.
Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member by jointhemajorityreport.com. Oh, incidentally, now the show is on, what's that new thing? Threads. I joined that too.
Oh, you did?
We're on Blue Sky. We're on Threads. Follow us over there.
Which one of these is gonna stick? Just tell me.
I don't know.
I don't want to sign up for a bunch of crap.
I mean, the advantage that Threads have is that they are, owned by a behemoth that has all of your data already. That being Meta.
So fun. So convenient.
So fun. Yeah. So convenient. I mean, that's where.
Do you know Zuckerberg's charging $12 for blue checks?
Is he?
This is what's funny about the Musk stuff is everybody thinks that like it's just Musk doing this, but Musk is actually masking an entire basically money grab from all these CEOs.
100%. I remember. I think I said it on the show when he rolled this crap out. There was a report that's like Meta saw that and were like, we need to integrate that into our platform, and now they're actually doing it.
We need to take this easy money.
Well, I mean, I'm not even on Facebook, and the only thing I look at. A little bit of like DIY stuff on Instagram. That's basically it. I'm barely on there as well. But, I really do. Nothing good is going to happen until everybody leaves Twitter. And so anything that sort of like hastens that and makes it lose, then so far I like Blue Sky, but there's not a lot of, not a lot of people there.
That's kind of the thing is like we have this idea of like these businesses or whatever that is so based on who owns it and what shareholders. Like these things are valuable not because of any inherent sort of decisions made by the CEOs, but because the people are there. Mm-hmm. And and they were on track, like MySpace, whatever. Like they were valuable because the people were there.
Totally, and it's not a question of like there is no. Marketing genius that's going to like have it happen. It's just going to be luck. It's just going to be luck.
Yeah.
And then,
which one the kids go to, basically.
Exactly. I know someone's saying Jaiku. I don't know what that means. But anyways, join the majorityreport.com. You can check us out on all the different platforms, buy some merch. Check out cedarseeds.com. A little late in the season, but maybe if you're in a place where your growing season is throughout the year, go for it. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Emma, no ESPN this week.
No, but we'll be back next week, and it'll be a mega episode talking about NBA trades, NHL draft, NHL contracts, free agency for the NBA, all that stuff. So stay tuned for Monday where we'll go through all that.
Celtics have no leaders now. They traded Smart. Was
that one sucks, but I actually think Porzingis is a good fit for what you guys are trying to do, as much as it pains me to say.
Well, it's time to get off the pot, and if it doesn't work this year, you blow it up.
And he's like a big that can score and isn't 400 years old, so that works for you guys.
All right. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
This weekend for Left Reckoning patrons, me and film guy Matthew Weiss will be discussing Prairie Fire, a 1977 documentary, which is the first segment of the Prairie Fire, or Prairie trilogy about North Dakota organizers that basically successfully secured the state grain elevator and state bank during the populism of the 30s and 40s. So check that out this weekend.
Well. Yeah. Matthew Film Guy, I guess.
He's got the connections with these old documentaries, and in true pirate fashion, we'll be playing those for patrons this weekend. So patreon.com/leftreckoning.
All right, folks. We may take some calls. Not too many. Maybe. 646-257-3920. We'll see in just a moment. But we won't turn it on quite yet. All right. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1 half. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Back.
we are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma's camera
I'm
turned off. I don't
here,
know
but
what's
my
going-
camera's not. So I'm a disembodied voice. Hold
There
on,
you go.
let me try to fix it.
I'll read this. Retcon. I've been a member for 6+ years, and I keep forgetting to say this. It's cute when you talk about driving a skid steer or using a tool. You remind me of my 3-year-old when they think they did all the work just because they whisked it a couple of times. I work in construction and use these machines and tools every day, and you're just adorable. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Pretty
Appreciate that.
condescending, I am her.
What? I didn't take it that way.
I mean,
appreciate
hey.
That's all
being
that
called adorable. That's right. Just an update on the referendum to put Cop City on the ballot. We are 10% of the way to our goal of 100,000 signatures and 14% of the way to the legal threshold of 70,000. We've been at it for 2 weeks. We have only 40 more days left. We need help big time, so please go to Cop City, vote on social media and online to see how to help. They are also hiring paid canvassers, $25 an hour if you live in Atlanta. Go to fieldworks.com/Atlanta. Also, maybe you could post something in the Discord too, and folks who live in Atlanta or have friends or family in Atlanta, get on that.
Yeah, we didn't play this yesterday, but there was a video of the Atlanta mayor that we had on the sound sheet, who like essentially was we could play it, but I mean we just don't have it today. But it was just like they're actively essentially trying to dissuade people from using this ballot initiative route, and he's like, oh yeah, it's not going to work anyway. Basically, was what the mayor was saying.
Folks got to get to it. They're really important. All right, let's cover a little bit what they're saying about the economy. Here is Fox contributor Brian, and to be clear, the Fed has been doing its best to disempower workers, and workers' wage gains have gone up over the past couple of years. It is starting to level off a little bit. the worker participation rate, we should be clear now, for the prime rate of like a age 25 to 54 is now a significant, I think, higher than it was in 2019 even. So the whole people are being lazy, this and that, of course, turns out not to be the case. But here is Fox contributor Brian Brenberg responding to the recent jobs report.
So you are seeing some signs of cooling in the labor market, and that's important because the president's going to get out today and tout his 12 million, 13 million jobs. I got to tell you, that's not telling the whole story right now. A lot of that is filling in from the pandemic. The real job gains have been much more modest than that. In fact, by some measures, we're still 1 million to 2 million jobs below where we should be right now because so many people are sitting on the sidelines. Yeah. They're not participating in the economy.
And that's just it. There's a difference
So
between.
just to be clear, so many people are sitting on the sidelines, they're not participating is not the case.
No.
There are some people who basically retired early, and it's tough to get back into the job force. You retire at age 58 to get back in at age 60, 61, tricky. But the idea that participatory rate, again, it's something like 80.9, I think it is, for people 25 to 54, and that is high. And that is the prime age. And the other thing is why wouldn't you get credit for creating jobs when all these jobs have been lost? What other opportunities is there to create?
Well, we saw this with Obama, right? The recovery was a lot slower. Right? And yeah.
I mean, and it's like their primary purpose on Fox is to maintain the general advantage that Republicans have in collectively in the U.S. on the economy. Every poll for decades has always said the Republican Party is better for the economy. And so that's a strength that they hit on regardless of the facts. As a propaganda outfit, to this? That's what they are. Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, we can keep going.
We're still 1 million to 2 million jobs below where we should be right now.
Oh, pause it. Also, the other point was should be.
Not participating.
Some hypothetical number this guy has in his head. Unemployment is just a couple of ticks away from where it was a couple of months ago, which was the lowest in 50 years. Continue.
Yeah. Much more modest than that. In fact, by some measures, we're still 1 million to 2 million jobs below where we should be right now because so many people are sitting on the sidelines. Yeah. They're not participating in the economy.
And that's just it. There's a difference between a job recovered after a pandemic and one created. Another fact I imagine.
We just spoke to David Dayen about how the Inflation Reduction Act is directly, right now, its effects are being felt. And that manufacturing plant construction has doubled in this country. That is going to be just new jobs straight up. Same with the dozens or over a dozen, I don't know, have the figures in front of me, semiconductor plants currently being built. These aren't even my politics that I think are massive wins or going to be seismic shifts in income inequality or something like that. But that's the facts and supposedly the kinds of politics that a center-right person would approve of. But it's Biden doing it, so it doesn't matter.
It's wild. We have to use these infantile metaphors like sitting on the sidelines. That is, like you said, because actually it's too real to say oh, there are people surviving without an income in a society that absolutely wants to punish them for that.
Yeah.
Yep. This has been pretty funny to watch Ron DeSantis begin to sort of blame everybody but himself for not catching on. I mean, the guy made a fundamental mistake, I think it was a year or two ago, which was that he could be Donald Trump.
Yeah, Trump without the baggage. Yes,
and it appears that he can't be. And here is Ron DeSantis on with Fox's Will Cain.
Its record of defeating the left on issue after issue, and we'll be making that case over the next 6 or 7 months. I'm running to win in January and February. I'm not running to juice polling now.
I do believe there is some truth in the saying that you shall be defined by your enemies. So I appreciate you bringing up those who are attacking you in your run for president. What about those, though, as well, that support you? Steve Cortez is one of the major leaders of a super PAC that supports Ron DeSantis, and he acknowledges that the numbers right now are not where they need to be. And Governor, I want to be clear with you. You and I have met on one occasion, and I think you have done a wonderful job. What I'm trying to suss out tonight is when that job, if ever, begins to resonate in the numbers for you for president. You know, and as I mentioned, we've met, and I liked you a lot, but there are those that say there's something about you that's not connecting for whatever reason.
I mean, this is amazing. This is amazing.
With friends like these.
Yeah, exactly. We've met, and I have to say, in that time, I thought that you were okay.
Not off-putting to me.
Yeah.
You know, I like your policies, but people really don't like you when they meet you. I mean,
yeah, there's just something about you that's just not connecting, like with your personality and your face and your aura. I like that he brought up the super PAC there, just because I saw this yesterday from Shane Goldmacher.
Let's go through that in a second. All right, let's we can do this because this is Will Cain trying desperately to be gentle and saying, like, where's the defect that you have? I mean, let's be clear. I personally think that when the entire country, if they ever get to see what's been going on in Florida, it's going to be very problematic for Ron DeSantis, and not just because of the anti-trans legislation, the frankly the racist legislation, whether it's like the immigrant stuff or the anti-CRT and the authoritarianism in you know, putting Rufo in that public university. I mean, on and on and on. And the
inflation was higher in Florida because of giveaways to the wealthy.
There's real economic problems coming to Florida, and I think that's going to be also a problem for him. But
his slogan is "Make America Florida," so that is going to be a problem once people start to figure that crap out. But
all right, let's continue here because all of that aside, Will Cain's trying to say, like, you're just not very likable.
Wonderful job. What I'm trying to suss out tonight is when that job, if ever, begins to resonate in the numbers for you for president. You know, and as I mentioned, we've met, and I liked you a lot, but there are those that say there's something about you that's not connecting for whatever reason, not connecting with the voter, whether or not it be personality. Donald Trump says it's about loyalty. Francis Suarez says it's about your relationships. And it's not about those individuals so much as I'm curious in the analysis of Ron DeSantis of why not yet is connecting.
Well, I think, did you just see the news today about the record fundraising haul we've had? Nobody's been able to match that in the history of modern presidential politics. So we've got a huge amount of support to be able to take the case to the people. We really haven't started that yet. We're in the process of building out a great organization, and I think we're going to be on the ground in all these early states. It is 3 yards in a cloud of dust type situation. That's what we're going to be doing. Right. But look, at the end of the day, nobody has stood up for hardworking Americans more than I have over these last 5 years and delivered the level of results that I have. That's going to be a great story to tell, because if we did it in Florida, we absolutely can do it as president. That'll mean the border, the invasion stops. It'll mean the economy's restored. And it's going to mean that woke ideology ends up in the dustbin of history.
One more on this path to the presidency, if I might, Governor. You said it's about...
I love the fact that you can almost, like, as he's going through his spiel, you can see Will Cain just be like, like he can barely get through. Will Cain looks so exhausted by DeSantis, you know, within literally 25 seconds.
Well, I mean, he's partially exhausted too, because the guys at Fox News are desperate for him to take off. Like, they are desperate for a Trump alternative. Every Republican power player that isn't like completely 100% detached from reality, knows Trump's a bad general election candidate. So they're trying to will it into existence. No pun intended.
But it doesn't look great, because if you pull this over, this is from RCP, Real Clear Politics. If someone pointed this out on Twitter, but the hype cycle had a pronounced effect. DeSantis is green there, Trump is purple. But it's over. It ended basically before May, and he's been flatlining since then. And, you saw this a lot in the 2016 primary. Like Ben Carson has this little moment, but Trump's the daddy, and,
Scott Walker.
DeSantis is over.
Scott Walker is much more akin to even what we're seeing, I would say, with DeSantis. Not sure if you agree, Sam, but it's or Jeb Bush. Like these guys are well-funded governors who have a ton of corporate big donor cash behind them, artificially inflated. And like with Wisconsin, that was a laboratory for what the Republican Party wanted to be, and it just didn't translate. He was one of the first to drop out.
Well, what I don't remember, and I just don't remember, if Scott Walker had put that Real Clear Politics thing up, because the fascinating thing about this is, when did DeSantis start his sort of barnstorming? He was hiding out in Florida, and it was basically around April. And it has been
so when he started running?
yeah, exactly. Right around there, I think, is when he said, I'm going out to the public. And then it was just like, I went to New Hampshire.
Maybe done that.
I went to Capitol Hill. I mean, people don't like him. And he's one of these candidates who are sort of like, the more you know him, the less you like him. And
he announced on May 23rd, which is right before he cratered in the. Oh, okay. Oh, I get it. That's May 23rd. Then?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So he got a little bit of a bump again. But stopped it.
That's when he announced.
Yeah.
But he went on his barnstorming tour before that.
Yes.
Yeah. Either way, the more visibility in the presidential race, the more he dipped. But can we just pull up this tweet from Shane Goldmacher, who, he's at the New York Times and he follows campaign finance. He's a good person to follow for this kind of stuff. So DeSantis keeps bragging about his big money numbers. First of all, I mean, I don't have a lot of this is dark money. So you're never going to know how much is from big donors. But I would guess a ton. He's doing a lot of Club for Growth things like that. But Shane Goldmacher says DeSantis raised $20 million in the first 6 weeks per Fox News. Trump announced a $35 million Q2, which, by the way, was an increase from Q1. But Shane says, let's break down that $130 million DeSantis super PAC haul. Yes, it's a huge sum, but money mostly accounted for. His PAC transferred $82.5 million. The super PAC announced it had raised $30 million by April 3rd. So that is less than $20 million since then. So they are artificially inflating some of this to make it seem, first of all, Trump is getting a majority of his money. I think, actually, I should walk that back. A lot of his money from small dollar donations, because I don't know fully what the deal is. DeSantis, I don't think, is having that same success. And then he's also on top of it lying about the amount of super PAC money he has in general. So they're feeling it. They're treading water, and campaign PR working overtime on that front.
Let's move to Ben Shapiro's brilliance that he, in the wake of, and again, we'll be talking to Mark Joseph Stern on Monday to break down the student debt case, the affirmative action case, and this religious people can get exempt from the laws of our society if they want to be bigots case. And here is Ben Shapiro explaining to his audience the fundamental principles behind this case. These are not legal doctrines. He's just talking about sort of broadly speaking. Remember, this is the guy who said, we don't have to worry about climate change because if people's houses get swamped by water, they can just sell it to somebody else. Play this.
Now, to be fair, there's confusion that arises when it comes to LGBT issues. Why? Well, because that's a question of self-identity. How would you even know if somebody walked into your business and they were gay unless they told you they were gay?
Pause here for 1 second. I want you to just follow along as he says this. Self-identification. Like, for instance, let's say if you were Jewish. I mean, people could say like, oh, I can tell if someone's Jewish or not, in the same way that people say I can tell if they're gay. But let's just go along. I don't think that's always the case. But it really is about self-identification.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and just suspend for a moment the Ben Shapiro's sense that he gets to choose who's a Jew. That's going to come into play here, because he said in many times, he has said that Jews are not really Jews because they don't practice the version of Judaism that he practices, which is important. But I want you to just follow along on this guy's reasoning here, okay? So go back to the beginning. Walk into a store. I don't know if this person's Jewish.
Now, to be fair, there's confusion that arises when it comes to LGBT issues. Why? Well, because that's a question of self-identity. How would you even know if somebody walked into your business and they were gay unless they told you they were gay? I mean, that is literally the only way that you would know. Or in fact, they asked you to do a message for gay marriage, or they explained to you that they were married to another person of the same sex. There are a lot of people who have various characteristics who are gay. The gay community is in fact not quite as stereotypical as TV would make it out to be, which means that very often, quote unquote, discrimination against a gay person is not in fact discrimination against a gay person. It's discrimination against behavior that is conducted by a person who happens to be gay. That is not the same thing at all. And that's the point the court is making. This is, by the way, a major...
But now, let's be clear here. If you are gay, it is definitionally, it means that you are attracted to people of the same sex, that you will fall in love in the same way that a heterosexual would with someone of the same sex. And as it is your right to get married, you will marry someone of the same sex. A straight person does not do those things. Doesn't matter how they identify. If they engage in these, if I'm going to go marry someone of the same sex, I can say that I'm straight, but it is a gay marriage. It is a marriage between two people of the same sex.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a practice. It's not like you happen to be gay. Like, that's what is definitionally why you are gay. In the same way that, but again,
but
the
Sam,
idea that you would discriminate, that he would be okay with discrimination against a Jew, not because of who his parent was, but because they're practicing. And incidentally, this is what happened during the Spanish Inquisition. You were allowed to live in Spain if you decided that you were no longer going to practice Judaism, but maybe you would practice Catholicism. It was all about your practice. We're not discriminating against you because you're Jewish. We're discriminating against you because of the actions that you are taking that are so Jewy.
Yeah, conversos, they called them in Spain.
Yes. And so the idea under this rubric, Ben Shapiro would have you believe that the Spanish Inquisition was not anti-Semitic. It just so happened that the people who were practicing Judaism were Jews. Mm-hmm. And and as soon as they stopped practicing Judaism, they were fine with the inquisitors, as it were. But continue here. See where he goes.
Person, it's discrimination against behavior that is conducted by a person who happens to be gay. That is not the same thing at all. And that's the point the court is making. This is, by the way, a major distinction that has never been properly drawn in the law, but needs to be drawn in the law. The gay rights movement is claimed they're the new civil rights movement. These are absolutely disparate movements. They're not alike in any way, shape, or form. The black civil rights movement was about the idea that you have an immutable characteristic that is not behaviorally based. Your race. It has nothing to do with your behavior. It has nothing to do with your feelings. You are black, whether you feel black or whether you don't feel black. Whether you, quote unquote, act black or whether you don't act black, obviously. In fact, there is no such thing as, quote unquote, acting black other than stereotypes. That is not the same thing when it comes to issues of sexual orientation, which is about interior feeling. It is about behavior in the real world. And that is why putting LGBT as members of quote unquote protected class under anti-discrimination law starts to get into very dicey activity as far as forcing other people to accept a behavior, not an actual objective state of the world that is visible to everyone else. It's not quite the same
this
thing.
Is just absurd, because you could say the exact same thing for religion. The exact same thing. And in fact, Ben Shapiro would, because Ben Shapiro says that I'm not Jewish, me personally, or he said the same thing with Bernie Sanders, because we don't necessarily keep kosher, or don't wear a kippah on my head. Now, of course, there are other Jews who would say that, well, Ben Shapiro is not Jewish because he doesn't have payas. He's not wearing talit. But that doesn't work that way in Judaism. That's a different story. But the point is that by his own very definition, there is no anti-Semitism. There is just people who have a problem with people who are practicing Jews. It's absurd.
But he's also wading into an incredibly homophobic and transphobic trope, which is that there's nothing immutable about your sexuality. That essentially people are choosing to be sinners as opposed to it being something that is inherent within them, their sexuality or gender identity. And with that, he is essentially like just regurgitating age-old religious and like fundamentalist tropes about those kinds of topics, which is that I don't really care if you want to be gay inside your head, but you shove that down. Totally. I don't want it rubbed in my face. I don't want it rubbed in this wedding website planner's face, essentially, right? And
I don't want to have to see anybody holding hands in the street. And it's also, what you're talking about is also the basis for promoting conversion therapy.
100%. Someone's sexuality is like, you can convert your religion. You can have a difference of opinion about how you grew up. You can make a choice to convert from Judaism to Christianity, Islam to Judaism, whatever. Your sexuality, that's who you are. So, like in terms of discrimination, that's an even deeper level as well, that he of course doesn't apply to it, because you can only have gay actions. You can't be gay. But is Ben Shapiro straight or only his actions straight? I'm curious.
I mean, it's a legitimate question. He would say the law needs to address this. Again, this has been resolved both at the Supreme Court level and now legislatively. Gay people have the right to marry. And I mean, we'll get into this more, the legal questions with Mark Joseph Stern. But the point is that when you operate in commerce in a society, you have entered into the realm of civil society. Mm-hmm. And your personal religious, your theocracy, your religious doctrines, your morality cannot override the civil rights of other people. The idea, I'll just go across the street. This is exactly what they said as to, and what Rand Paul would say back in the day, why the Civil Rights Act doesn't need to exist. Oh, you're going to be racist and you're not going to serve black people in your hotel? Well, that's okay. Because right. I won't go there. I'll just go to the hotel down the street. Well, what if there isn't a hotel down the street? Mm-hmm. What if there, I mean, how many times, like the idea, like, well, people aren't going to go there because it's racist. Yeah. No, this is the same argument that they made. You can go down the street and go to some place where gay people are welcome. It's absurd.
And I just want to add this too. When people talk about trans activism or trans ideology, that is a continuation of the same trope. It is not it's an acknowledgement, or it's an admission in their mind that they don't see trans people as a category of human being, but as an agenda item or as some sort of belief system, which is completely antithetical to like the reality of trans people, gay people, queer people, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
This is not an ideology, it's who they are.
They say trans ideology because they're in company that won't accept them saying mind virus.
And they want to frame it as a way to, like, of conversion and shame, to a place of that where it's about your actions as opposed to about who you are as a human being. And yeah, obviously that's Ben's ideology too.
Let's play this. Should we play this clip? Let's play clip number 9. This is, having traveled to Monticello with the kids, I had a little couple hours of being too pedantic with them, which was inevitably going to happen. And we ended up talking about the Lost Cause and the Dunning School, and my kids' eyes glazed over. But history is important, folks, and I apologize to my kids for that. And here is a good example of why it's very important to teach people history, real, actual history.
But they know the story, and they know the playbook that they always have. Lie, deride, besmirch, make innuendos, tell flat out untruths. Because you quoted Hitler, you support Hitler. I guess every history book in America supports Hitler now. They all quote him. And here's the thing, whether you're talking about Adolf Hitler, whether you're talking about Chairman Mao, whether you're talking about Stalin, whether you're talking about Pol Pot, whether you're talking about Castro in Cuba, or whether you're talking about a dozen other despots all around the globe, it is time for us to get back and start reading some of those quotes. It's time for us to start teaching our children some of those quotes. It's time for us to start teaching our children about the dirty, despicable, awful things that those communist and socialist despots did in our history.
Can we teach kids about Castro? I mean, I'm okay with that part.
North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson defending the Moms of Liberty folks. In fact, speaking to Moms of Liberty event in Philadelphia, trying to justify they were not. It's one thing to quote Hitler as a warning. It's another to say, like, we're going to follow his program.
I mean, the newsletter didn't have like, this is bad context. It said, he alone who owns the youth gains the future. And there was an Adolf Hitler
and
quote.
Then they later said, we forgot to include the condemnation of Hitler when we quoted him.
Yeah, things get lost in the printing press.
But I think Hitler is actually the wrong metaphor. These are Klan people. These are literally just descendants of the Klan. It's homegrown here, but like, where do people think the Klan went?
I mean, they call it.
It went a little bit
Parenthood.
under the water, and now they regrouped, and now it's Klan.
It's Daughters
Parenthood.
of the Confederacy.
Exactly,
too.
it's Moms of the Confederacy.
Moms of the right.
And people should see this. This is the point where they went. This is an evolution. You go from being a plantation owner, a slave owner, to supporting that system, and then when you lose the Civil War, that lineage has to go underground, literally under a hood, so they're not identifiable, but they are maintaining as much of that system as they can. They can't actually have you enslave people, but they can disempower people. They can maintain a second-class citizenry for those people. And then it submerges a little but more and it comes back out. Maybe it's in the form of like Jim Crow laws, and it's in the form of a Supreme Court that disempowers people politically. And then as you get to the 60s and there's legislative fixes for some of it, then it goes, and then it just becomes sort of a social thing, or maybe a sort of like a proxy thing. As Atwater said, we started saying busing and we didn't have to say the N-word. We started saying taxes. We didn't have to say the N-word. And this strain continues. And now we're just in another period of it popping its head out of the water in the same way that it did in the 100 years ago, frankly, coming out of Reconstruction. These are not snapshots. These are continuation. And sometimes there's an ebb and sometimes there's a flow, but like the tide goes in, the tide goes out. The waves keep coming.
Yeah, exactly. Like Nancy McLean in Democracy and Change, the discussion of the Virginia oligarchy and being like, oh, how are we going to respond to this school integration stuff? Well, it's voucher systems, it's stuff like that. And yeah, it's just like it gets a little bit smarter and a little bit more. They figure out new ways to present in polite society, but it's the same old thing.
And to be clear, you know, the idea that there would be a black man like the lieutenant governor here, who is whose political fortunes are tied to essentially telling white people that they're not racist, that there's no white supremacy. And to be clear, look, we've talked about this. Eddie Glaude is a great writer on this, and we've interviewed other people who's talked about this. On some level, we all practice white supremacy in this society. We all do, and on some level, there is a racist element to much of what we carry around with us on any given day.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole challenge for a society that has been literally built upon the spoils of racism is, how do you evolve forward? And that involves, like, you know, questioning yourself at any given point, or, you know, testing yourself at any given point, or, you know, having an awareness. Then it's going to be uncomfortable at times, and it's going to be, you're going to be unsuccessful at times and whatnot. But what that guy does is basically tell an audience, like, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Racism is fake. It's all something the other black people are saying as an excuse. And also, here's an actual quote from him at a church in 2021, not on race, but there is no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth. So, I mean, yeah, fascists and Confederates, neo-Confederates can be black.
Yeah, and I just, to what he does, or what your definition of systemic racism, Sam, is the one that needs to be repeated all the time. Because making racism about personal individual pathologies or morality, I mean, and in some instances, these people are like beyond the pale and you have to call it out. But speaking about it as kind of like an ever-present smog in our society that we're needing to blow away as time goes on is much more productive. Making it about some, like a personal, individualized issue helps racists, because like it gets these reactionaries defensive, and then you have someone like the lieutenant governor come in and say it's all okay. See?
It's natural, actually. Your community being disinvested in, and look at my success as proof.
Yeah.
I miss these guys. So Greg Gutfeld now doing double duty, right? Have they started that?
I don't know if they started, but Bradley says next week. Yeah, so he's at 10 p.m.
Yeah, or next week or the week after. It's like July 17th or something is when Gutfeld at 10 p.m. starts.
Oh, you know what? Before we get to that, I have a question for you, because I didn't see all of the Tim Pool thing. I apologize for that. I'm going to get around to it, but my kids did not want to watch for whatever reason while we were hanging out.
That's disgusting. But
I do remember at one point where Tim Pool was saying, was responding to that story about the 10-year-old Ohio rape victim, and how she had to go to Indiana to receive an abortion. I
brought that up because he had called it a hoax, and Yeah, go on, Sam. I can find the exact quote of his if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because I just saw that the rapist was convicted just now.
I brought up that he was charged and that the doctor in Indiana had been fined for speaking about it, but this was Tim's exact quote. He walked back when I confronted him about it and said that the hoax was the politicization by the Democrats was the hoax. The quote that he initially said was, "There's no rape kit. There were no criminal charges, not until now. Why didn't anyone knowing this girl report this? This is why I say, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe it is a hoax. Now, as to my previous statements, I want to make sure I clarify. I don't like the vague natures of this, blah, blah, blah." But he does.
Let's watch that clip.
Okay,
let's watch
sure.
this clip.
But we have to get to that part where he says the hoax, because there's like a 5-minute lead up. I remember we tried this before.
Okay. Well, the point being, you just read that off. And now that doesn't sound to me like it's a political hoax. And also, the word hoax has a meaning, and I don't think that Tim is incapable of understanding what the word hoax means.
It's very clear what the message he's
the idea
saying.
of politicizing something, I've never heard anybody use the term hoax in that manner. Although, you know who also thought it was a hoax when it first happened, in the same way that Tim Pool did, was Jesse Waters, which is just a coincidence because I know how supportive.
They're all independent-minded.
Yes. But there's a couple of things that people should be aware of this. That girl went to Indiana to get an abortion on June 29th of 2022. And it is only now, yesterday, I guess it was, or that we know for certain, as a legal matter, that she was raped. Now, if a child is 10 is in any way, is pregnant, definitionally, they've been raped.
Yes.
Because they're not at an age of consent. But the point being is that this is the process it takes to establish a rape legally. Right now, you can surmise that any child under the age of 15, 16, depending on what the age of consent is, and any 17, it has been raped because they're not capable of giving consent. But the point being, the rape exception in abortions is a complete fraud and red herring.
It's not actionable.
It is not actionable because there's no way to establish rape until a trial has taken place.
Yep.
Now, I guess you could say definitionally, and I don't know how all states deal with this, but it's unclear that certainly, you hear people like Matt Walsh and these other right wingers who don't think the age of consent is appropriate, that there should be one or anything like that. But this is a perfect example of that. But I just was struck by the fact that, Waters at the time had said it was hoax, and apparently Tim Pool did too.
Yeah, and the reason that they have to call it a hoax, right, is one, to avoid questions about the completely unactionable elements of like rape and incest exemptions, which are just there to dilute, to temper, to soften the brutality that they're advocating for with abortion bans. And secondly, so it's one, serves that function, right, to still try to prop up those exemptions in order to get like a fundamentalist project through, but also to you have to call it a hoax just because they can't square abortion bans in general with the fact that these kinds of instances happen, right? The example is so egregious. Everyone who sees this case, most people are going to say she should have an abortion. That is horrible. So the story was so insane that it both undercut rape and incest exemptions and abortion bans generally. So we can't even deal with this. It has to be something that's entirely made up, some sort of false flag. That's what the right deals with, talks about all the time when they can't deal with an issue. Is it is false flag.
Yeah, well,
basically.
it's the Trump derangement syndrome thing, or
Yeah.
DeSantis derangement syndrome, and we see this with polling. Like I think Alex Perrine has covered this, where they've tried to ask like people, "Hey, what do you think if the Republicans would do this or would do that?" And the people answering the polls literally don't think they're
Focus
real
groups.
questions. Yeah, the
Yes.
focus groups literally
Focus
think
groups.
they're fake policies that the GOP actually isn't pursuing, but they are.
Yeah.
John Miller on the IM says the rapist of the 10-year-old pled guilty, which shortened the length of the proceedings, in fact. I mean, so that the timeline for these things too. But let's also be clear. To think that and to define hoax as the politicization of this incident, and to suggest that this is not a political event is absurd. This is a guy and an entire movement that is politicizing the rules regarding sports leagues and sports associations, disparate ones all across the country. And they're politicizing that when there is no political mechanism at all in which to, impose upon sports associations and leagues and whatnot some type of diktat as to who should be participating under what circumstances. However, the reason why that girl had to go to Indiana was specifically because of politics, because of politicians passing laws that prevented her getting the health care she needed in that state. That is every reason why she had to travel to Indiana to get that abortion was a function, or I should say Ohio, was a function of politics.
Yeah.
Every single reason, every step of the way, every choice was a function of politics. And so the idea that that's somehow a hoax to politicize that is a completely, totally a political obstacle to her getting the health care that she needed. That's what that was.
And I want to make this point too. It's a miracle that her rapist was even charged, even convicted, was even in a position to plead guilty. I mean, less than 1% of rapes result in felony convictions. Then this is from RANN.org. Out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 975 perpetrators will walk free, which is much different than other offenses like robbery and other things like that. So these cases are already incredibly difficult to prove, let alone obviously getting the abortion in time.
Should we do this? Greg Gutfeld. This is the 5, and this is this is part of the vigilante thing, right? That is brewing. I mean, we saw this with the guy the killer on the subway. And to be clear, when you kill somebody, you're a killer. The legal case is going forward. But when you kill somebody, you're a killer. That's the definition of a killer.
And you might be the danger to society, actually.
Exactly. But there's this spirit of vigilantism that they need to promote, both to suggest that there's some, runaway crime. I mean, and it's amazing how this stuff recycles. I mean, Bernie Getz. And that was a time where actually there was the New York City was in a much, much more difficult place. But here is the Fox, the 5.
A moral value, you can get in trouble for it. The bottom line, you have to intervene when no one else is doing anything. We see this on the subway. That's how human beings react. We see a vacancy and we want to fill it. If the police can't do it, if the security can't do it, you will do it, which leads me to a suggestion. This is a solution that could end this right now. When you think about it, you're decriminalizing theft, right? That means stealing from them is also decriminalized. So I don't understand why, if you have a supermarket or any kind of store, you have these guys that just hang out and they wait till the people leave and they take their stuff and they get like 10%.
You get like a posse.
Yeah, it's a posse. It's basically a product posse. And so they just hang out there and then it's like, so you get, let's say they take $500 worth of stuff, they get $50 if they take the stuff from them. It actually sounds like a lot of fun for kids for a summer job. Hang out.
Can you pause it for a sec? Like, I'm sorry, what kind of like 12-year-old short story is this crap? Greg, are they going to wear capes? Like, what will they call themselves? They're either the Hardy Boys, maybe they can have a little newsboy cap on, or they could just be the Avengers, the Dwayne Reed Protectors.
Sorry, they're the Robin Hoods of pharmacies. Yes.
Having served on a grand jury recently, I can confirm that they are still charging people for stealing, say, from a sunglasses hut or something like that. But also, there's a very clear message that needs to be sent about this, because if you are working for a boss at like a retail employer and somebody tries to steal something, do not be a goddamn hero, please. You are not paid enough by that place of employment to put your body on the line for that merchandise. They will write it off. It's a cost of doing business.
That's why the employer knows this too. Exactly. The employer, it's like, you're not qualified to stop anybody stealing this stuff. Now, first off, they also have insurance. This is built into their, into their budget, but they don't have insurance if this employee gets beat up by these people or he gets hurt by these people. I mean, that's the whole point.
But they're not even employees that he's advocating for here. On
that note,
he's saying like random people should do this for their own like financial gain.
That's his jokey way of trying to say that we're living in a lawless society because there's no laws, because people are stealing detergent from supermarkets to make it look like the whole society is falling apart.
Hilarious.
Shoplifting has existed for longer than he has been around. It is the case. And here's the amazing thing too, is like, where is the panic about the ongoing daily cases of white collar crime that exist? Like, you never hear about that. But if you're talking about like people are stealing detergent, I'm not saying that people should be allowed to steal detergent. No, they shouldn't be allowed to steal detergent. But the point is that like, if you're talking about cost to society, what is the cost to society when you have banks putting people into essentially mortgages that they can't pay? They have a fiduciary duty. They are loan officers. It is their job to make sure that people don't go into mortgages that they can't pay. Or when you have, banks that have like shoved clients into products they're not even aware of. Or when you've had embezzlement, or when you have Medicare fraud, or when you have any type of like wide scale fraud, or for that matter, tax evasion. I mean, how much more is it costing society to have something like tax evasion than it is to have, shoplifting take place at the local Costco?
Yeah, and what's worse to me than somebody walking out with anything is like, there's this case, TJ Maxx in Miraloma, California, where this guy apparently thought he had enough evidence to suggest that two black women walking out of the store with handbags were stealing it, and they got in a physical fight. He's just a guy there. That is not civilized behavior. Like, people shouldn't be allowed to steal stuff. People should not intervene to protect like merchandise. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's a great point too, Matt. Like, who is going to be the subject of this targeted harassment? I mean, of course. Who are the fascists that are going to be like, I'm going to protect the property at the CVS? I mean, that's me here.
And
they're going to go after black people.
We are really like baby brained that we look at images of people stealing detergent and then think of like, oh, that person is bad. What kind of society do people have to like form
what are they doing
posses,
with detergent?
as Fox News wants to call it, to like what? Like detergent. They're selling detergent because you can get a good profit on it. Same thing why you steal TVs and stuff. And guess what? Stealing a TV TV during a riot, like, okay, you're gonna sell that for what? A few $100? That barely pays a fifth of your rent in a lot of places. Like, so the idea that people are living high off of no, people are fighting to survive. And all these places, they've been cutting back on security and all this other stuff, and just want more cops to take care of it for them.
And Tom from Yacubia and Cap'n and O'Fun also remind us that the largest theft in the country is wage theft.
Yeah.
And it's not close.
So let's read some IMs, shall we?
We shall.
Here we go. Sam's Tight Pants. So while 209,000 jobs were added last month's were revised down slightly. Wage gains are keeping pace to where real wage gains will likely see their biggest month-over-month gain in the past 12 months or so. CPI headline number next week should cool to just above 3%. We are not in a recession nor imminently heading towards one. Keep the faith. Left is best. The Fed is going to do its damn best, though, to put us into a recession enough to start to strip away some of those wage gains. I can assure you.
Yep.
Vermont Ben, is Samantha Sider on Threads yet? Indeed. Sam.Cedar. I don't really follow, Instagram. So I have no Instagram stuff. I have I think I have even 2 Instagram accounts. I don't even know, I'm never on there. So, but I did my Instagram account for Threads because it was easy. You just do it. I don't even know how that happened. Robbie Meatballs. Why is he even running? I know he's term limited out before 2028, but wasn't he not allowed to run now according to Florida law? Well, they changed it.
Changed it. Yeah. But he has no control over the Florida legislature. They're the ones just really driving the bus on anti-gay discrimination, according to someone who I spoke to recently.
Star Fox. Sam, were you aware that per fellow massholes, Pete Holmes and Jason Mantzoulis, the way to ascertain the depth of the Massachusetts accent is not park the car in Harvard Yard, but the phrase smugglin' burglars? Thoughts? Yeah. No, I think there's something to that. Park the car in Harvard Yard is more the Brahmin, park the car in Harvard Yard. But smugglers, smuggling burglars, yeah. That seems legit. Militant apathy. 6 Degrees of Sam Cedar. Bro, are you connected tangentially? It worked with Gavin McGinnis, Proud Boys, and Robert Kennedy. Just be honest. Are you actually the enemy? Yeah, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Did you do the tour with the slave quarters next to the stables that were used to heat the rest of the house? He used the slaves for radiant heat. No.
Wow. I mean, I read a book about, I can't remember what it is. Maybe I'll look it up before the end of the show, but it goes into the panopticon. Jeremy Bentham, that was a famous theorist of that, a ability to surveil people in large portions. And it's a concept that really applies to that on top of the mountain there.
Frank Blunt's 3 days for the 4th, but only 1 for Juneteenth. Canceled. Nothing is as funny as watching Emma's face during a Hello Tushy ad read.
I can't help myself. It makes me super uncomfortable. But it's a good product.
Dave from Jamaica, 3 days off. Do you hire foreign employees?
What?
I don't know what that means, but I can get used to the 2-day work week.
A majority coup supporter. Vacation, great way to parade the old man out to throw off the replacement of Sam. Allegations, wink. Great work, Emma. Left is coup.
Hey, relax.
Those that labor for my happiness. Slavery at Thomas Jefferson's Monticello by Lucius Stanton.
Our Burroughs Garden. Hi, Sam. Matt. Hi, Emma, Sam, Matt, Bradley. I just first wanted to say I realized I could get free membership to your Twitch stream, so I am now a double member. The heat is killer up here in Halifax, too. Hope your drowning in sweat isn't worse than mine. I watched your analysis of the lab leak theory released by the Biden administration. Totally agree with most of what your take was. I wanted to give you the name of a non-paywalled, excellent plain English, at least as far as molecular biology tends to be, article that anyone interested in the evidence for and against the lab leak theory, which supports what you were saying. Take a look for a critical analysis of the evidence for the SARS-CoV-2 origin hypotheses from the American Society for Microbiology. It's a concise, short read. Check that out. I think I may have read that actually. Millennial Industrial Complex. Sam, when you make the switch to AI Sam, can you please make sure that AI uses the 2021 or later videos for the model? Silver Fox Hot Sam is best Sam. Well, thank you. That's very sweet. Murray the Orc. Ad right under my YouTube player from the NRCC that reads, the radical left wants non-citizens to vote. We must stop them before it's too late. Computer numerical control. Thank you. Oster Tony. Sam, what countries' constitutions explicitly define rights of labor, protected them against employers early in the organization of the economy? My default assumption is that labor has always had to organize to win protection amendments, but maybe some capitalist systems have better represented labor from the start.
That would be interesting. Good. Scandinavia had some pretty crazy, pro-labor culture. I imagine that probably maybe got into the Constitution, but I'd have to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they it might be Sweden that has this incredibly strong tenants' rights union that has helped keep prices down. That's less labor focused, but I'd have to look more into it.
All right, let's read 8 more of these. I don't know why. Duber. David Muckraker Dayen coming on hot and strong.
Hey.
Professional dumpsters fire. I love whenever Dayen comes on because he gives me great talking points to argue with my hardcore Republican family.
Good.
All right, beautiful. Lawful waffle. Great stuff. Day in, day out. Kowalski from Nebraska. Wow, only 3 calls this week? How are we going to get our MRA or libertarian beatdown fix? We can only rewatch Emma circumcise Tim Pool so many times before
my God.
The screeching whore becomes dull. This used to be a real country. Wow. The heat must be getting to Kowalski.
Yeah, it's tough out there in these prairie summers. Start seeing mirages over the corn.
Palladino flight. The tide goes in, the tide goes out. You can't explain that, LOL.
You can't.
No.
Man, I remember that.
Why don't we have that on the soundboard? Yeah. Why was that the biggest video ever? Just because he was such an idiot, Bill O'Reilly?
I think it was ripe for everyone to be like, yeah. It was like during Comedy Central or Daily Show stuff.
You know why I think it went so big is because he was debating an atheist. And that was in that mode, or at least where I was, where new atheism, being a leftist was all about, giving a finger to religion, and that's why.
Spaghetti Cedar. Does the crew know the Socialism Research Center at the Heartland Institute cited in Newsweek article about Mohela? No. It's pretty specific. Chris Surada. Anytime someone points to petty theft to argue for harsher penalties, I just Google whatever the company is, plus fine to see what crimes that company has committed. Yeah. All right, 3 more. DC Socialist. Since the state of Michigan sued because they would lose money in Supreme Court, Missouri. You said MI, but I don't think it was not Michigan. Use that as standing, but in fact, they would have made money. Couldn't another state or lending agency sue the Supreme Court using the loss of those extra funds as their standing? We're losing this extra revenue because you ruled against it. Well, you can't sue the court. With the income-driven repayment system, could the administration change that 20 years to 5 years? That's a good question. That's a good question in my mind. Bull Prague. They could have just as easily quote Whitney Houston's greatest love of all. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. And the final the final I am of the day, of the week.
The short week.
Of the short week, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back on Monday. NYC driver. If anything actually life-threatening was happening around Greg Gutfeld, he'd be the last person to stand up and do something. Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job this short week. And in my abstention last week, Isaac, John, Dorsey, Maria,
wow,
Kelly, great job this week too, guys. We will see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101